Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sudden Wealth. I hope you guys are doing very well. I hope you guys are having a good weekend. By the way, as a little bit of point of order, next week I'll be going under surgery. Nothing special, but in any case, it will be almost impossible for me to, put out any kind of content. So what I'm going to do is pre-record a series of videos that I wanted to discuss for quite some time, and I never managed to get the time. But please bear in mind that if I miss a big event that's happening, don't get so surprised. Okay, so that's going to be the reason why. By the way, guys, if you do enjoy the content, please consider dropping that like and subscribe. As you know, that's the only thing that I ask. So today's Sunday. I like to talk a little bit about a bit more macro items, let's say. So today I'll be discussing basically how close are we from a complete de-dollarization, and how will the world look like, in my opinion, when that happens. Now, first of all, and this is very important, because if you actually listen to any debates or any news around this, you get the feeling that the de-dollarization which is happening, that is a reality. But you get the feeling that the replacement is right out the door, and this is 2 or 3 years and everything changes, and the dollar is finished, give it 2 years and it's going to go to zero. Like this kind of notions, right? It gives you the impression that this is happening super quick and that's it, good luck to the dollar and the US is forever finished, right? I mean, this notion. Now, yes, countries are trying to get away from the dollar. Why is that? See, the US made a grave mistake, like many other reserve currencies on the planet. So one of the things that I find the funniest is actually there are people on the other side of the camp that think that the US dollar will forever be the reserve currency. Now, the funny part about it is that, do you understand that the US dollar is the 5th reserve currency? Not the first, not the second, number 5. First one was the Portuguese escudo, the Spanish peseta, the Dutch guilder, the British pound, and now the US dollar. So we've seen this movie play out quite some times. And it's so funny that people still have the arrogance of saying, oh, this has never happened in history, and for some reason, despite the fact that we are doing the exact same things that led the other countries to lose such status, for some reason the US will just, have no issues with this. Now, is there evidence of de-dollarization? Yes, there is. So global trade is still close to 50% done in dollars, but it's less than it used to be. It used to be close to 60% at some point. The percentage of foreign reserves that countries hold, what does that mean? So let's say you are a country like Japan, your currency is the yen. How much do you hold in foreign currency, in this case the US dollar? And now you look at all the other countries in the world and you see, okay, how much is the US dollar being held? About 40, almost 50%, but it used to be almost 70 at some point. So there's a clear de-dollarization. Why is this happening? Well, you see, if you're the reserve currency, you want the world to accept your currency. But if you want the world to accept your currency, what do you need to be? Neutral. You cannot partake in disputes amongst countries, because as soon as you do that, and the US has been doing this over the years, but it was always kind of tolerable. Okay, North Korea on one side, you have Iran on the other side, you have Venezuela, you have Cuba. Okay, you have certain, like people can get away with it. But when you start to freeze billionaires' assets in another country because they did something that you don't like, now you're just giving the signal to the world, oh my God, if we are not careful, maybe one day I do something that the US doesn't like, and they do the same thing to me. They kick me out of the payment systems, they freeze my assets, they threaten to sell my assets, in effect, stealing them. So you're giving the incentive to people to get away from it. Now, what is the issue? And this is the funny part. The world is in a situation where it's hostage of the dollar, because the world in itself put themselves in that position. So when companies and countries across the world got the dollar debt into their books, now you need dollars to repay such debt, which means you need to go fetch dollars. You see, but the Fed is not printing. So there's a shortage of dollars, which actually pushes the value of the dollar up. So think about it. It's a very interesting paradox. The countries who want to get away from the dollar are the ones making the dollar stronger because they need dollars to pay off their debt, but there's not enough dollars in the planet. I'm talking the financial dollar, not the dollar within the United States country that normal people use. I'm talking about the financial dollar, the one that is around the financial spectrum, that buys bonds, buys stocks, buys basically pays off debts. You get cash flows in dollars, all of this. Yeah, so the rest of the world makes the dollar more important by trying to get away from the dollar. But this is the prison that the world put themselves into. Now, there are ways to get around this, but it will take 20 years to do it. And then the question also becomes, okay, where do I go? Now, here is where the BRICS currency comes into play. And based on, if you think about it, all the nations in the BRICS are growing, all of them are expanding. This makes a lot of sense. You see, but the issue is that the majority of those countries are exporters, and in many cases, they export the same things. Which means in order for that to work properly, you need some of the countries importing and the other countries also exporting, because if all of them are exporting the same things at the same time, then there's always an oversupply of the currency, because you want to get your goods out, but you're, in a sense, fighting with your partners because you all want to get out the same type of goods. That is why, for example, the euro works a bit better. It has many flaws, but it works a bit better because rarely the countries export or import the same thing, and you can have net importers and net exporters in the same level, actually. Okay, will they go to gold, for example? Well, they can use gold to give some credibility to the system, because one of the issues of the countries like China, Russia, etc., is that it is very difficult for them to gather the confidence of other players for obvious reasons. So will it be Bitcoin? Well, I think Bitcoin has a strong case for countries who are a bit left behind in Africa, in Asia, or in Latin America. But to be a global reserve currency, I am not so sure, because the economy grows, but the number of Bitcoin doesn't. Which means that Bitcoin, once the last one gets mined, will turn to be deflationary, in the sense that money supply will grow across the world, but Bitcoin will stay at 21 million, which means that into the future, as more paper currency is produced, the value of Bitcoin goes up and up and up, which means you cannot have a bond market for Bitcoin, because nobody's going to borrow money if they need to return something that is more valuable into the future than in the present. However, I do think it will play a major role. I think at the end of the day, we'll be moving into a multipolar world. So instead of having the US dollar dominating everything like we have today, I think you're going to have the dollar much less important, the euro probably a bit more, substantially more important, and then you're going to have the BRICS currency more important, and then certain countries will experiment or start experimenting with Bitcoin and see how can they perform by having Bitcoin in their books. I mean, if they start to perform really well, then of course the poorest countries will have the incentive to go into Bitcoin as well. To be seen. It's never been done before with Bitcoin, so we cannot say it's going to work. We cannot say it's not going to work. We need to see. Now, why is this relevant? That is the question. See, the US has been living in the privilege of not needing to produce stuff. Why? Well, the rest of the world, in Asia, namely, they produce the stuff that we like, and the US just imports it. And what does the US export? Money. Just create money out of nowhere, give it, it has value, because everybody wants it, because it's the world reserve currency. Now, when this stops, or when this reduces dramatically, there's an issue, because now you'll be forced to start actually producing stuff that the world wants. Or maybe you'll need higher interest rates for people to accept your bonds. But you cannot have higher interest rates if you have budget deficits and trade deficits out of the wahoo. So will it be painful for the US? Sure. Being the reserve currency is a great privilege. But once again, when do we make our biggest developments? When we are challenged. When we are the reserve currency, you have everything in your favor, which makes you soft and which makes you make mistakes, and which eventually leads you into too much debt, too much money printing, too many wars, too much deficits, too much antagonization of other nations, in which you stop being the sole power as you used to be. That is just human psychology. But, very importantly, I don't think this is going to happen before 2040. Like this full de-dollarization, multipolar world. And the reason why I'm bringing this up to your attention is that, when you hear this kind of stuff, it gives you the impression that within 3 years this is finished, this is done, and the US is going to collapse into oblivion and all of this kind of stuff. But with that, guys, thank you very much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one.